Hi everyone. I'm just trying to find the study guide for Paradise Lost, and it's been lost. Actually, I'll be able to find it in a minute, but I just realized there's so much that I would like you to know about John Milton. I'd like you to spend some time looking up something about his life. I will tell you some experiences that I've had and some things that I have felt about Milton in my experience, and this is my opinion, so you can take it or leave it. But Milton, by the time he was writing this poem, and by the way, he wrote this when Shakespeare was still alive, I believe, but he was completely blind. He had served, I believe, with Oliver Cromwell in some of the great British wars. He was a general, but by the time he was writing this, he was blind. And he would have this come to him, and he would immediately call his friend and servant and other people he dictated the poem to them, and they wrote it down. And it took several years to write, but he would get parts of it, and he knew that it was developing in his mind, and he knew that nothing like this could come from man, but it came from God, he believed. And so as he's writing and dictating, and this is coming out, and people are reading it, they realize that he's got a lot of things wrong. Much of his work is not really what the Christian doctrine is. So I'm going to put some of this in the study guide, but basically that some of the tenets that weren't accepted Christian doctrines are that God, who created Adam in his image. And even though that's in the Bible, the image of God, according to the Christians, was an ethereal, is that the word? Substance that wasn't in the image of a man. So that's one of them. And Milton talks about how God and Adam are basically the same image. Another one, I've written a few of these down. I'm just trying to find them. Oh, that there was a civil war in heaven between the Son of God and Satan. Does that sound familiar? Now we know all of this is in Revelations, but the Christian community at the time that wasn't part of their doctrine. Another thing was that a third of heaven was fighting alongside Satan, and we know that a third of the host of heaven does follow Satan. We also know that that's in Revelations as well. So it's out there. It's in the New Testament. It's just that these were things that the Christian doctrines were not. They weren't teaching this, and they weren't thinking it. So you're going to recognize some of these things that we know that have been revealed to us. So it's really fascinating. This is where I get my opinion that God was talking to men before the church was restored and giving them ideas and giving them truths. Now, of course, this is not going to be all truth because it's in story form and poem form, and there's a lot of dialogue that's not in the scriptures. So one of my favorite friends, Mortimer Adler, wrote this book called Reforming Education. And in the prologue, he talks about how there's two ways. Some of you have heard this before. There are two ways to teach great books. One is dialectically. I'll talk about that in a minute. And the other one is doctrinally. And most of the colleges teach the great books doctrinally, which means you're to take everything they say as doctrine or really get into it and really see it as a truth, okay? Generally speaking, Okay, and he talks about this in the prologue, and you can read that if you have access to this book. I think it even might be online in PDF, I'm not sure. But the dialectically is what Mortimer Adler talks about. He says that all great books should be studied and taught dialectically, which means that you find, through discussion, you find one truth to many errors. So if there are two truths, there are even more errors that you're going to find, and that you're to look for the truths, and they become more clear once they sit next to an error, because then you have to ask questions and pull it out and try and Kinley, you're a good one to ask these questions, and so are you, Elijah and Enoch. Many of you are good to ask the questions to really clarify, and the rest of you are learning to ask these kinds of questions where you're going to try and find, but how does this fit, and so we kind of clarify that truth that's sitting on top of this foundation of errors. And that's what he says is the best kind of learning, is to really, really pick out the truths from the many, 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 many errors. And he does say there's usually one truth to many errors. And that's how we read this. So that's how I want you to read this, just like any other book we're going to read in this semester, this year. And another thing you need to know is, well, John Milton was very intelligent when it came to a verse. It's he invented what's called the blank verse. I'm going to have you look that up to find out what that means. He was an astute scholar. He really deeply believed in God, and he wrote Paradise Lost to illustrate this understanding. He had studied all of the great books from the very beginning of time all the way up, but of course he had additional books of his time. The Bible had just been printed 100 years or 150 years before his time, so he had access to the Bible, to Plato and Aristotle and all the epics of Homer and Virgil. And so he had all of that information in his mind. And the more you know, the more you can articulate, right? The more you can think and see. That's why we're exposing you to a ton of different great books. It's not super coherent. You have to kind of fill in the blanks as we go. But what we're doing is we're exposing a little bit at a time. And then as you go deeper into your education, and hopefully you're going to continue doing this for the rest of your life, you will find more clarity as you go back to these books. So this whole book is about how Adam and Eve lost the state of paradise. And so this is part of our plan of salvation in the fall of man. And then there's other books that have been written, even C.S. Lewis, I think it's C.S. Lewis who wrote, I don't have it, well, I can't remember who wrote Paradise Regained, but I've never read it, so that's something I get to read. We're also going to see something else, and I'm going to write this in the study guide too as just kind of a bonus section to look over. But there is an interesting way that the English wrote at this period, and I don't know why, but they note, and you can see this in, let's just focus on Paradise Lost. He associates the bad, the evil, with intelligence. Like those who are evil are way more intelligent. They're more clever. They're going to figure things out, how to get around and do whatever is needed. Whereas the good are kind of, I'm going to use the word stupid because in the true sense of the meaning, it just means that they're not very intelligent. Excuse me. And so he associates, just like the style of the English writers at the time, he's associating the good people, God the Father and the Son of God, not as, I hate to say stupid, but they're just not intelligent. So notice that. And then I've got a few questions after that bonus material. I'm giving you a quote from John Erskine, who's one of my favorite authors as well. He's the father of the Great Books. And he's the one that started the Great Book School, where Mortimer Adler later became a teacher. But anyway, there's a quote there from John Erskine, and it talks about this very thing, where the English wrote that the evil people were the intelligent people and the good people were the stupid people. And some questions to kind of get you thinking about that and wonder why. And maybe you can make some connections there about Machiavelli, the Prince, or Richard III, or those kinds of works. Is there anything else I wanted to talk to you about? Make sure that you read a summary. Make sure that you also read that preface in the book. For every book, there's a preface, and you can read it, and it'll help you find the argument of what's going on in that book. If you could, try to listen to the Audible recording by Flo Gibson. I think she's the best reader. That means you get to spend a little bit more money. If you don't want to do that, no problem. You can read it, but it is a little easier to get through this poem and that much of the poem when you have Audible, and you can have a discussion with your parents and see if this is something that's worth spending the money on. But I highly encourage it. Also, try and write a character list at the front of your book so that you know who's who. There's going to be Raphael, and there's going to be some other angels with their names. And so once you read the summary and you see you read the preface and you know the character list, then you're not going to be focusing on trying to figure out what's going on as much as you're going to be figuring out and focusing on principles. Okay? And I think that's all I want to say to you in that there is also an article in the reading packet that you have about Paradise Lost. It was an Ensign article many years ago about this man, and it gives some more insights. So with that, I say goodbye, but good luck. Of course, remember this next week, we're just really focusing on catching up and writing your outline and essay. And then on Tuesday, before your essays due, actually, on Tuesday, we are going to be studying, this will be the following Tuesday, right? We'll be studying the Paradise Lost books 1 through 4. Okay, please reach out if you ever have any questions. See ya, bye.